Hi, folks. Steve Urban here, founder and CEO at recruiting and consulting firm Riderflex. If you think today's tip or guest interview can help someone you know, please share this with them. And if you enjoy listening to our show, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button on the episodes. Finally, aside from our podcast, our day job here at Riderflex is to provide recruiting, staffing, and consulting services. You can visit riderflex.com to learn more about us and get the information on the services we provide. And now, a quick word from our sponsor and friends at Marketing 360.
Try the #1 marketing platform for small business. Everything you need from design to marketing to CRM. Learn more at marketing360.com. Marketing 360. Fuel your brand.
If you're a business owner and you're listening to this episode, just as soon as you can afford to surround yourself with a good attorney and a good tax account, please do. Make it a priority because it will make a difference in your life. We just got a new tax accountant this year. We switched, and wow, what a difference to have somebody that's a strategic partner that's making suggestions and calling us early and meeting us in October. And this is where we're headed. And you should do this and you should do that. I mean, I needed that years ago.
Oh yeah. We all don't know we need it until we get good counsel from all those different things, and that's the point. But otherwise, aside from that, life is good, and I hope the same for you. What's happening?
Yeah, it's good, man. Business is good for Riderflex, our recruiting firm, growing like crazy. In big part to friends and advisors and referral partners like yourself that introduce us to people. And so, yeah, we're busy, we're growing, we feel blessed. I feel thankful. My wife was the other day, she's like, she goes, you're having the best year ever. You're busier than you've ever been. You got more recruiters than you've ever had. You got more clients than you've ever had, and you're still stressed out. I said, yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Yeah, I guess I am just as stressed as I was when cash flow was tight. And I guess the better it gets, then you start getting stressed that you don't want the better to go away. So you're just still running as fast as you can go. I don't know if that's what happens to you in your business.
It's not far off. I mean, there's that, but there's a certain point I think where you achieve a certain level, and because of the people around you and because you've worked so hard to get to a certain point, at least for me, I worry less about maintaining it because I've just seen that just building it with good people, hardworking people, smart people, that it just maintains and then builds just by nature, and you could step on the gas or that. But for me, the stress comes from dealing with so many people, and if you own your own business as you do, and I did, and I'm happy to say that I don't own my law firm anymore, but that's another story to roll into. When you're dealing with so many people that depend on you for direction and placement and response, and that's where I think the stress comes in for me. It's being responsive, because you pride yourself as a professional of always providing the right response or the best of your abilities, and to keep in communication. And that gets overwhelming because, when you're sitting there on a phone call and you get 7 texts and 26 emails and 3 WhatsApp messages, and all at the same time, it starts to put the pressure on, even though you earned enough goodwill with just about all these people to say, listen, step off for a little bit and we'll take care of you.
Isn't it? It's a killer, right? Yeah, I feel the same way. Like if I heard somebody say, yeah, I called you last week, you never heard back from me. Like, that is just, for me, that's a punch in the gut for somebody to say that. Right. So I'm like you, I always am trying to make sure I'm responding to everything. You're right. It gets more and more difficult. I want to, before we get into business in cannabis though, I want people to know more about you, like the young Bob Hoban, the where you grew up, siblings, mom, dad, whether or not you got arrested when you were in high school. I don't know. Give us some early life stuff if you don't mind. Start with where you were raised, where you went to school, if you don't mind, for the listeners.
Yeah, or as my friends called me, those were the days of beardless Bobby. because as we age, I think we wear the beard a little bit well, and our face gets bigger.
Yes.
So why not cover it in a beard? But
Exactly.
no, I grew up in New Jersey and southern New Jersey, and
Okay.
outside of Philadelphia, and look, life was good. I grew up middle class kid. Played a lot of sports, loved music, and ended up. Uh, my mom and dad got divorced when I was in seventh grade. So my
Oh,
mother
okay.
had a number of sisters, and I was raised by this great group of women and my grandmother and my grandfather. And I was sort of that's what really gave me confidence, and it still just didn't come till later in life, but drive and ambition. I always
Okay.
worked hard, but I think that the drive and the vision and the ambition to do things with your career, not just work in the career, didn't come till I was probably in my 30s, which you know some might say was a little bit late. But I'm a huge basketball guy. I We won the state championship in 1993 in New
Oh,
Jersey. That was something we're very proud of.
whoa. How old were
Wall,
you? How
um,
old were you?
I was a junior in high school, so that was however
Ooh.
old you are when you're a junior in high school,
Were you in
17,
the
18 years old.
were you starting lineup as a junior?
No, as I played a utility role, and then sort of came into my own a little bit as a senior, and actually have a Wall of Fame plaque here behind me for Camden Catholic High School.
All
Um, but
right.
uh,
All right. That's
but
cool.
but I was too slow. They also had a nickname for me, Slow Mo Robbo, because it looked like or molasses, because it looked like I was running through molasses. But I ended up because of my love of the game, I ended up officiating. I've officiated minor league basketball for years, college
Cool.
basketball, men's, women's, D1, D2, D3, junior colleges. I don't have the time to do it these days, but I do hope to get back to that at some point. But
What's the biggest game you ever refed? Like a huge D1. Was there something you remember specifically? Like, did you ever do Duke, North Carolina, or something like that?
Well, I did. I've done. I actually I've refereed Duke several times, mostly
Wow.
preseason or early tournament games,
Okay.
early season tournament games like Christmas tournament games where there's not a whole lot of pressure on the guys, and got to meet there. Tom Izzo is a highlight of mine.
Nice.
Very supportive, but also mean and nasty on the sidelines, as you'd expect. A certainly successful coach to be. But believe it or not, the biggest game with stake on the line was a minor league basketball game between the Billings Rim Rockers and the Minot Snow Bears in Billings. If Billings won, they made the playoffs. If Minot won, then they made the playoffs.
Mm,
And these guys were all they were great athletes. Not all of them were great basketball players,
okay.
and they all had ambitions to make the next level. And a lot of these folks either played college basketball, but this was their shot at it. And there was a guy on the Minot Snow Bears at the time who was named Troy Jackson. And Troy, he recently passed, I read. He was the
Mm.
brother of NBA coach and player Mark Jackson, longtime
Oh,
player. And
okay.
but Troy was 6'10", 330 pounds. And he was slow and he was big. And, this was as far as he was going to go.
Okay.
And, but he was going to get that team into the playoffs, and he puts his head down and he starts backing into these guys. And I'm the referee on the baseline. And ultimately I see him coming in, and he knocks this guy over, puts a bucket in. I didn't have a quick enough whistle. So what I do is I look the next time down the court. There's, a minute 30 left in the game. I know he's going to do it again if he gets the ball. And I did the thing that you're not supposed to do as an official, is you kind of wait for the thing to happen again instead of just being there
Mm,
and living and breathing it. And so I blow the whistle, but I blow it against him as he puts the bucket in. The home team goes nuts because it's an offensive foul. The basket doesn't count for the other team. He gets in my face. And 6'10",
6'10", 300 pounds.
um, you know, referees separated them, and this and that. He was yelling, and I was a younger guy at the time too, so it was easy to pick on me. Anyway,
So you were 6'2". How tall are you? 6'2", 6'3"?
6'2", 6'3", probably 6'1", 6'2" now. You know how it goes. But
That's
no, but just a funny end to that story is, so you know, the home team won and the crowd was pleased, but they put us up in this hotel, the same
uh-oh.
hotel that
Uh,
Minot was staying at. So I
uh-oh.
go out for a dinner and a couple drinks with the other officials. I
Oh
come
boy.
back and I see
Oh,
him in the. I had a ball cap on, had no idea who I was. so,
oh really?
there was
Whew.
no risk because I'm sure he was
Uh,
still had that fire in his eyes.
so did you have siblings? Were you the only child, or do you have brothers, sisters?
I've got a younger brother. He lives in Fort Collins, Colorado today. 5 years younger than me.
5 years younger. Okay. And then what about you? So you had a great relationship with your mom. Did you not have a good relationship with your dad? I'm just curious there.
No, I did. I mean, my dad was involved with sports and all
Okay.
the things that you did as a young man. But
Okay.
you know, when the divorce occurred about seventh
Mhm.
grade, it you know it I didn't see a whole lot. I always saw him on weekends, every once in a while, this and that. But it
Yeah.
did separate you from having that person in the house, which is why
Mm,
one of the reasons for me that I take that charge as a dad really, really seriously. And
yeah.
I do everything I can, despite my busy workload, to be around as much as I can, you know.
Are both parents still alive?
Uh, no, my father's alive. He lives outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My mother passed away from pancreatic cancer. And incidentally, or perhaps more directly, my mother, and trying to help her when she was told she had 6 months to live with medicinal cannabis many years ago, was sort of was directly how I got into this industry, because I was a commercial litigator and a real estate transactional attorney, and then you know I began to try to figure out, after seeing just these opiates and the effect they had on my mom, who was using them the way they told her, but it was no quality of life, especially if you only had 6 months to live. So then
Mm.
we helped with some cannabis, you know, before there were dispensaries, and then I ended up representing those people. And there were 6 of the first 8 or 9 dispensaries in the city of Denver, based on the strategies that we put together.
Wow.
And the best news of all, although she died in the same year that the Phillies won the World Series, which I think was her doing, because that was 2008. She passed away in July of 2008. But the the she lived for 3.5 years with that, with
Really,
pancreatic cancer.
really, really.
And a lot of that without opiates.
How about that? So let me make sure I understand. So you're practicing law. You're living in Denver at the time. You're in Denver at the time.
Oh,
Where we?
yeah, I live in Evergreen. I've lived in Evergreen except for 11 months for 20 years.
But I mean, when your mom was sick, you were living in Colorado.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. And so she was sick, and you go. Were you a cannabis user? Like, were you a consumer? So you knew these guys or you knew people around it, and they had told you, "Hey, this will help her." So you were around people that told you, like, "Look, your mom should try this." Is that what happened?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, between my brother and I, we can always go out and get some cannabis. My
Yeah.
mother wouldn't smoke anything, quite literally, to save her life. And
Right.
then, you know, making a brownie or a cookie, doing it ourselves, which, you know, I don't know. I like to think many people had that kind of experience. My brother and I certainly did back
Yeah.
in college and whatnot.
Sure.
Making the brownies, and that's not an experience I wanted to give to her, because it was, you know, it was one of those things where maybe a 22-year-old kid likes it, but an adult with a deadly condition is not bound to like being, you know, knocked on your socks, so to speak. So you know, we kind of started talking to people. Like,
Okay.
this was before there were dispensaries and before there were
Right.
products. So,
Right.
you know,
Right.
some people made crackers, or they made cupcakes, or they made a
Okay.
brownie, but they made it under the guise of the medical marijuana program. So it wasn't, you know, 200 milligrams, 150 milligrams of THC, which is intended to sort of knock you off your block. They were more 20 or 30 or 50 milligrams. And
Okay.
then that began to build up towards that. In fact, there was a product called Chiba Chews, which are Tootsie Rolls, were infused
Yep.
by THC.
I
And these were
remember.
sort of precursors to the Chiba Chews. So you'd get a Chiba Chew, and one little Tootsie Roll was, they were between 70 and 100 milligrams. So you took little credit cards, like slices of it, and said, all right, does this make you feel better? Does this make you feel better? Just
I
to try to
see.
dial it in.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. For the listeners, by the way, in case you're listening to this episode and you have no idea how many grams is powerful or not powerful, because I know you know it, I know it, but some listeners might be like, okay, well, 20 milligrams, what does that do? Well, most casual users, like a recreational casual user that would use once a week or so, would probably take 10 to 15 milligrams, right? I mean, something like that. So
yeah, I'd say, your novice user shouldn't go beyond 5 to start. Your
okay.
average user is, 10 milligrams will have an effect. And then I think, someone who consumes cannabis on several days per week, maybe 20, 25 is
Okay.
probably where they are.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
then
So
again, if you use it regularly, particularly if it's for medicinal purposes, the people that they can take 80, 100 milligrams because they're used to it, but not your average person.
mm-hmm. So so this is happening, and I'm very sorry that your mom went through that. I know it's terrible, pancreatic cancer. It's horrible, but she goes through this. You help her through it. You get more involved. You learn more. I'm guessing you're just learning more about cannabis this whole time. And what happens? Is there some jumping off point or some pivot point where you're like, I'm gonna practice law around cannabis. Like I'm gonna switch gears. What?
Oh yeah,
Or did
no,
it just?
that was it. When I started to, so these were caregivers. You literally went online and you Googled cannabis caregivers Colorado, and there would be websites, and these were under the guise of philanthropic sites, people trying to help people connect that had, I'm a caregiver, I have some family member to take care of or friend,
Right,
and I don't know anything about cannabis. I go to these people. So sometimes you'd call them and they'd say, hey, I got the best stuff in town. I'll meet you at 7-Eleven. And, you'd say, all right, well, duly noted. But at the end of the day, that's not what we're looking for. And then, there was a couple, literally older couples that said, look, my husband makes the oil and I make it into these cakes and, this and that. So that's kind of how that process rolled out. And, I began to see an opportunity because what I was doing at the time, a lot of was a prior opportunity to sort of build up a practice in the law. Eminent domain was a big topic, meaning when the government takes property, and that got slippery. The reasons there's eminent domain is because the government's supposed to be able to take property for a road, a school, a police station, a public use. But the public use definition got twisted a little bit to mean economic development. And it quite literally meant that I could condemn a Motel 6 if I wanted to put a Ritz-Carlton on it because it would generate more tax revenue for the public. That
wow.
was so I did a lot of that, and I rode that wave for quite a while. Because I saw that as the opportunity. It was an interesting topic. It was something I was interested in. It involved roll up your sleeves legal work, and it fell into litigation and real estate at the time. So I kind of saw this opportunity with marijuana, generally speaking. And I had an intern at the time and a friend who worked in the property rights realm. Her name was Jessica Corey. She was the wife of Rob Corey, who is presently disbarred in Colorado, but was one of the OG lawyers in cannabis in Colorado. He was a criminal defense attorney. So as the criminal defense attorneys began to get a little bit overloaded with their, they overlooked their skis. They were great criminal defense lawyers, but they couldn't do employment contracts and the like.
Okay.
And that was where, I had an opportunity. So these things started to happen all around the same time. And then I read an article about building a national law firm. Like all these things happened within months of each other. So
Wow.
I started to attend cannabis shows, conferences to attract clients outside of Colorado. And I met other lawyers, and I would ask these lawyers, would you like to work together and build the first cannabis law firm, let alone the first national cannabis law firm? And then, the rest is history. So we did that.
Wow.
So all of those things came together, and, here we are today, where the same lawyers that, years ago were going, oh, there's the pot lawyers, are the ones going, hey, how do we become pot lawyers?
Yeah. Right. Now they want to be friends. Now they want to hang out. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Bob, I know Yeah, it's just like in high school, right? Like they didn't want you to come to their party back then, but now they want to come over to your house for the party. Yeah, I totally get it. How big did you, so Hoban Law Group, I mean, that was, you grew your business before you sold it to Clark Hill. I mean, you had how many employees, how many lawyers? I mean, you grew it into a pretty huge
Yeah.
practice.
Well, the Hoban Law Group was around, started out as Hoban and Fiola with my partner, Dave Fiola, who,
Okay.
he was a wonderful employment lawyer and helped out on the cannabis stuff. But after a period of time, he wanted to just focus on what he was doing. And I just wanted to get deeper and deeper into cannabis, hemp and everything about it.
Mm-hmm.
That it's been around for 13 years, or it was around for 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
At its height, we had about 56 lawyers, and
Wow.
about 30 of those were direct employees, and maybe the other
Yeah.
25 to 30 were independent contractors. And that was a product of trying to grow quickly without having to take on the overhead, and it suited those lawyers' needs. For example, maybe you had in the instance of a particular attorney, she recently had children and wanted to work from home and was an
Mm-hmm.
excellent transactional attorney, but only wanted to work 15 or 20 hours a week. Or
Mm-hmm.
you had a lawyer in a particular state who knew the political world, but didn't know how to do the corporate transactional stuff. So,
Mm-hmm.
they drummed up the business in state X or Y, and we did the work on the back end. Or they
Mm-hmm.
were an alcohol attorney that some of those skills were transferable to this, but we only needed to work with them 5 or 10 hours a week. So that was the arrangement. And it really was, it was magical in many ways, because it was some of the greatest people I ever met. And you don't always say that about lawyers.
And you ended up becoming the number one cannabis law firm in the country. You ended up becoming personally an international cannabis expert as this entire thing grew, because you saw it early, you saw the opportunity, you jumped in head first, you were aggressive about it. When I first met you, I was just blown away. I thought, man, this guy, like, who in the United States knows more about legal cannabis stuff than Bob? Nobody.
Well,
And so,
but that was by design. I
right.
just, I mean, I can't slow down. I can't sit still. Ask
Yeah,
anybody
I
that knows
believe
me.
it. I
I
believe
can't
it.
sit still. There's a great line in a song called "Everything All the Time," or "Too much of everything is just enough," and I kind of live by those principles as best that I can, as I can.
You get that, you get that speed and energy from your mom or your dad?
I have no idea, because that's a great question, because I mean, both great people, smart people, but neither. My mother was what they, she was she worked for the Red Cross. She separated blood into its subcomponents, and then made sure hospitals got what they needed. And my father, to this day, he works on logistics, runs warehouses, shipping and receiving in regions of the U.S. And there wasn't anybody in my family anywhere that was ambitious to go in the way that I've become. So I,
Gotcha.
honest to God, don't know where it came from, Steve, but I can tell you the only theory I have is because it comes from within. You don't decide that you're going to be something or
Right.
other. Some people do, and it can happen, but it just comes from an innate sense of where to go and what to do. And hey, let's go for this. And it's that competitive element of it. But I was in a terrible car accident at the end of my junior year of high school. So my theory is, and I almost died.
Mm.
I believe that there's something to do with that sort of, it took a little while to catch around, but that made me realize,
Mm.
boy, you
Mm.
really only do have one chance at this thing. So you might as well go for it. And, sometimes I sure don't know what I'm going for, but I'm going to go for it for sure.
Is your wife, does she ever look at you like on a Sunday afternoon when you're supposed to be relaxing? Meanwhile, you're like out in the yard, you're out in the garage, you're moving around, you're doing stuff. Does she ever say, hey, will you just like sit down? Will you just sit
All the
down for a minute?
time, all the time. There's no sitting around on a Sunday afternoon. I'm on a motorcycle or a dirt bike or a snowboard or something. That's the whole thing. I've got to stay moving. Now, I do hope sincerely that as I get older, that slows down, but I don't know, maybe not. And maybe that's the wrong thing to want, because as you get older, it seems like the ones that do stay active are the ones that, keep living a darn
That,
good life.
that's right. That's right. How's your body holding up? I'm just curious, when you go hiking, mountain climbing, snow, or, snowmobiling, whatever you're doing, how's your knees? How's your back? Like, how are you feeling at this age?
Good. I'm pretty active, and I ride that I'm a Peloton guy. I ride the
Okay.
exercise bike, and I do some core work, 3, sometimes 4 days a week. If I'm at sea level, I like to go jogging. I don't like to jog in the mountains. It's just it's just not, it's very limiting. But I also do a lot of things. So if I have an injury, or even a tweak or something, if it's a muscle thing or if it's a joint thing, I have people. I have a guy who's a muscle activation therapist, so that if you're so that I can stay in good shape. I have a guy who does I've done that PRP, that platelet rich plasma therapy, where if I have a joint that hurts, because knee in basketball in particular, or from snowboarding or skiing, they take the blood out, they put it in a centrifuge, they purify it, and they put it back into the joint, because blood flow doesn't go to joints, and it heals it like super fast. I actually sort of finished a round with who I lovingly call my witch doctor. It's called Network Chiropractic, which is a whole nother thing. It's a form of chiropractic, but it doesn't involve the cracking, etc. It sort of helps you deal with stress better, and helps your central nervous system, your spinal cord, in other words, not get all wound up on every single thing that comes at you, so that you can kind of be a little bit more laid back. Because the theory is, and it's proven to be true for me at least, and I'm 46 years old, those aches and pains you get in your back and your lower back and your hips and all this other stuff, a lot of that stuff, unless it's truly structural, it's all avoidable, and it's a product of stress, or it's a product of your body leaning forward too much, too right, too left, and so I do a lot of those things. It makes me feel good, and I try to be proactive about it, but it's also it's kept me moving. I have guys my age that that don't do anything anymore.
Right.
You still do that? And I go, I guess we do judge it a little bit, but at the same time, it's
we do.
On,
yeah, we do. I just went for a full. I'm 54, and I just went for a full checkup. And I go back to my doctor, and he pulls out the report, and he's going over it, and he's telling me, the cholesterol, this. He's going over all the stuff. And I said, okay, well, so, all right, yeah, well, what do all those numbers mean? Am I good? Am I good, bad, average? Like, where am I? Am I winning? Am I losing? He goes, listen, you're in much better shape than most of the 54-year-olds that come in here. And I said, that's all I need to hear. Just stop right there. That's all I need to hear. Now I'm going to just go home and celebrate.
No, that's a great thing. And, I got to look at, when I went for a physical, I go every other year for a physical. And this year they said, there was a different nurse that took the initial information. She says, all right, so tell me what medications you're on. And I say, well, I mean, occasionally I take ibuprofen. And she looked at me, she looks at my age on her chart, and
She goes,
you don't take any prescription meds? No. And that's a shocker, to your point.
that is a shocker. That's a shocker to me. That's a shocker to me. Holy cow. You don't take any. Holy cow. What do you, ibuprofen, and an occasional cannabis, and an occasional cocktail. That's it.
Well, and usually the ibuprofen is because of the occasional cocktails, but that's neither here nor there.
That's so awesome, man. I will tell you, I was somewhat, surprised when I saw that you joined Clark Hill. I saw it in the press, or I can't remember how I saw it on LinkedIn or something. And I saw that. I'm like, what? Okay. And because, we know each other. We visited a few times, and you had a great practice there. And you also had your thing going on with GPS, Gateway Proven Strategies. And I'm like, and then I saw this Clark Hill thing. And by the way, Clark Hill, awesome, super respectable, giant firm. I mean, great to be associated with them. Nothing against Clark Hill. I was just like, what? Why did he do that? Walk me through that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, look, it's a question a lot of people ask, because in a lot of people's minds, and in my personal mind too, owning your own thing and having a successful business, Steve, you got one, you're doing it, you're living and breathing it. it's people's dream, and everybody looks at you and goes, "That's great! Like it's amazing. Kudos
Right.
to you. Congratulations." But for me, I think that other opportunities kept popping up on the outside. We grew very quickly as a family, as a law firm, which is
Okay.
unusual with lawyers in a law firm at the Hoban Law Group. And like any family, um, not that anything bad happens, but there's some people that rub each other the wrong way, and
Yeah.
things like that.
Human
So
nature.
there was a little bit of that, but
Mm.
frankly, I just got tired of having to keep building it because I can't sit still. I wasn't happy, never happy with where things are. I always think there's something we can do better, or I can grow something. And I just kept seeing the industry getting more sophisticated. I saw some of my competition, succeeding, and I kept saying, well, if my competition pushes me, hopefully we push them as well. I push
Yeah.
myself all the time, and it just seemed like this was the next chapter of
Okay.
what we built. That's the way I looked at it. And in fact, I ran into a lawyer, great lawyer named Henry Wadkowski out of San Francisco, works in the cannabis space, but far beyond that, he's a great litigator. He's responsible for a number of the positive tax decisions in this space, the Champs case in particular. But Henry is one of the first guys I went to. He used to work for the Department of Justice years ago, but I
Okay.
went to him 10 years ago, thereabouts. And I said, Henry, partner up with us. Let's build this
Mm.
thing. And here's my business plan. And at the end of the business plan was, the potential, the exit scenarios. This is what
Yeah.
we'll start to look at in 6, 7, 8
Mhm.
years. Hopefully by year 10 or 12 is what I said. And first thing he said to me in San Francisco last Friday was, Hoban, you did it. You did exactly what you said you were going to do. And I'd like to take credit for thinking about the idea, but
That's good.
it was more of, I'd been approached by firms annually, quarterly
I'm
for a
sure.
while.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I'm guessing, so you weren't shopping it. You weren't like on a roadshow trying to sell that. I'm guessing somebody at Clark Hill called you.
Well, no. So by the end of 2020,
Hmm.
I first offered the firm to all of my lawyers,
Oh,
in
really?
my top
Oh,
tier, to see if they
okay.
wanted to take Hoban Law Group over. And the
Okay.
resounding response was, we like being lawyers and we like working here, but we don't want to own a law firm. It's a challenging business for a variety of reasons, but the owning a law firm. But
Hmm.
my point is, so I did start to shop it once they
I
turned it
see.
down.
Okay.
I talked to about 3 or 4 large consulting firms. I talked to almost 50 law firms, believe it or not. Uh,
Really?
and I narrowed that down to 5 between September of 2020 and about March or April of this year, when I narrowed it down. And there was a good mix of big firms, small firms, medium firms. I think people that I just really really liked. One of the things about Clark Hill that was very cool, in addition to some of the things you said, was their new CEO as of January. He's been with the firm for 20 years, plus or minus. But a young guy by our standards, in his 50s,
Okay.
very energetic. This firm has an ambitious growth plan, and it was great to hear from the top. I love what you've done. I
Mm.
share your vision about what you can
Mm.
do with cannabis,
Mm.
and we want to build an office in the Denver market. He said we have Denver envy, so we sort of aligned. We met each other. They were just really good folks, down to earth
Okay.
guys that you could sit down and have a beer with and just
Yeah.
talk about the future. And they committed to things, and they never deviated from what they said. Other firms, which would have been great to work at, sometimes you'd end up, well, you're just a cog in a wheel. Go to the corporate division and sit in the corporate practice unit and build your practice there. But these guys were like, no, we want to be like the top 3 or 4 in the country if we can. Let's go
Okay.
do it. And here's the commitment to that. So that meant a lot. They were really good people. And now I've got access to, well, not just high quality lawyers in different
Right.
areas. You need
Right.
that.
Right.
But someone who's done like a particular nuanced thing many, many, many times.
Mhm.
That's the benefit of having a deep bench like this.
Mm. Did they already have a cannabis division when you joined or no?
They did. In fact, that was another great component. And they've got, I, for better or for worse, I get patted on the back for building this thing a lot, but they had a really strong foundation. And there's
Oh,
lawyers that run circles around me in terms of the day-to-day practice of the law, Michigan practice, Nevada practice, cannabis lawyers that are just that are really, really good. Some of their California folks.
Okay.
So we took that, we brought some of our folks on. So right now, as a cannabis industry group in a
Mhm.
700-person law firm, which I never thought I'd hear myself say, we've got about 100 folks that regularly participate with our group from all different practice areas by design. And then we've got about 58 folks that are regularly engaged, meaning, the majority of their week is spent on cannabis matters. So
Okay. Okay.
that's pretty good. And as I've said to other people, the phone keeps ringing. People know where to find me. So that's good. That doesn't go away.
Now, what about this? Because finally, like last year, we got 2 or 3 calls at Riderflex from other recruiting firms sniffing around. Hey, what are you guys doing? Hey, are you for sale someday? Blah blah blah. Finally, got enough attention to get a few of those calls this last year. Those didn't develop, but I did have those thoughts where, like, okay, well, I kind of like being captain. I don't know if I want to like ask somebody if I can go on vacation. I don't know if I want to leave early on Friday and go to the mountains in my Jeep. I don't want to have to ask anybody. So I don't know if I really want a boss. My point is,
Yep.
how's that? You haven't had a quote boss in a long time. How is it weird? How are you adjusting?
Well, I mean, look, first of all, I'm still in charge of the Denver office, so not a
Okay.
lot has changed in a day-to-day perspective.
Okay.
The thing that's changed is when we need to make additions, I don't have to look at the dollars in the Hoban Law Group bank account and say, okay, well, I can only take this much out this month because I need to earmark this for there. The
Yeah.
dollars are coming from an established, source that I and the other thing about being a lawyer is partners as I am, and there's various degrees of being a partner. You own the firm. You don't get to be a partner in a firm unless your colleagues and the leaders see you as you
Mm,
care. You're worthy of being an owner because you're a
gotcha.
good lawyer, you have a good reputation, and you're ambitious to build things. And
Mhm.
so I can't tell you that, you know, there's people I talk to, but they're all supportive. I'm not running to people and saying, hey, can I do this? Or hey, can I do that? We've just continued to do the things that we've always done. And the people are very supportive of it, us, and it's pretty transparent. So it's a good point. It's an excellent point, in fact, because that is many people's fear. But I think that especially if whether you're merging, combining, selling, whatever it is, if you're doing people, you're not just getting hired to go do a job where you got to prove yourself. There's a mutual understanding that what you guys do benefits us and what we do
Yep.
benefits you, and we both want to continue doing the same thing but do it together. It's almost like I said, people don't believe it, but it's almost like nothing's changed. Yes, there are people I need to ask things for or run through, or I've got to make a case to hire an associate. But it's probably an analysis you should go through anyway, even if you were making a decision on your own.
That's a good point. Should the listeners that are listening to this episode and that know you or have heard of you, do they still call you for the same things? Do they still call the Denver office? Do they still call Bob Hoban for all the same things that they used to, or has certain practices, stopped, certain specialties stopped, or it's all still the same thing? They can call you for
No, yeah,
whatever.
it's all the same thing with the added benefit of now um, being in an AmLaw firm that's rated, perceived to be in the top 100 or close enough to say that and quote that. You're in a different caliber of client on a daily basis. So the same things from before, those people continue to call. We haven't missed a beat. But then add to that the ability to say, oh, well, this company wants us to take them public. And then this company wants to hire us to do all of the regulatory, IP, litigation, everything in 12 different states.
Hmm.
That's the kind of thing that comes around now. So it's the same. And so the way I configure it is, and I try to stay involved with the clients that come in through me, at least in
Okay.
some form or fashion. And then now I've got this roster of people that I need to coach. I'm the point guard. I need to get the ball on the less sophisticated matters to the people that are in this range that know this and can do this. But if it's going to be a NASDAQ public offering, I've got to bring that way up to this high level. And that's very fun. It's like the Hoban Law Group, but it's on another platform. And the lawyers are excited to be cannabis lawyers, or at least in part cannabis lawyers, because being a lawyer is not an easy gig. And when it's just day to day to day, anything that makes it interesting is attractive to lawyers. And I think this industry does that.
Sounds like you're having fun so far and you like it. I mean, I can feel it on you, right? I can
So
feel the vibe
far.
on you that, yeah. I can feel that. I want to ask you some questions here before we run out of time about cannabis, little 30,000 feet stuff, if you don't mind. And by the way, for the listeners, clarkhill.com. And if you go there and you just click on people, you can see Robert T. Hoban, and you can see the phone number and his email and all of that if anybody's interested in getting a hold of Bob, or you can connect with him on LinkedIn, of course. And it's under Robert Hoban, just for everybody's knowledge. I want to ask you some questions, Bob, for 30,000 feet. I'm sure you get these. You've probably answered all these a million times. But for our listeners, if you don't mind, federally with cannabis, I mean, how far are we, man? How far away are we? And I want to tie that into, here's why I'm asking. I want to tie it into this. I had to go down to Oklahoma, which is where I grew up, for a funeral recently. And I drive down, take my Jeep down, I drive down. I get into town there, stop at a truck stop or something for gas or whatever. I'm digging around on my console, and I have a little cannabis in there because I'm a casual cannabis user, from time to time. And usually when I go to the mountains and go camping, but I had it in my Jeep, it's just in there. And I see it, and I kind of have this moment where I'm like, oh shit, I got this cannabis with me, and I'm in Oklahoma. Like, I had this kind of like, what are the rules here? I don't even know. So I kind of had that moment. How long are we gonna have to live like that? Like when is it just gonna go federal, Bob? That's my question.
But Steve, first of all, who'd have thunk it, so to speak? But Oklahoma is one of the most liberal places with cannabis laws in the entire country right now. There are more
crazy.
dispensaries in Oklahoma per capita and per jurisdiction than anywhere else in the country. It is
really
one of the easiest places in the country to get a license and to create a business. So go figure that a place like Oklahoma, with at least my perception on the outside of it being conservative politics and everything else, it is a hotbed of cannabis activity through and through.
So, how about that? That is wild. But
it is an exercise we all have to go through. What's in your bag? What's in your wallet? Don't go over this state line or that state line.
I know.
Look, there's a legal perspective of that too. Even if you're traveling with something, the federal government's really not going to get involved. They're going to refer it to local law enforcement unless it's over a certain amount that as a federal concern, right? So even if you get caught somewhere, I'm not advising people to travel in states where it's not, but they're going to turn it over to local law enforcement. And in most states, and there's some big exceptions, it's a relatively minor offense, or they just make you throw it out. But federal law, look, it's a hot button potato. We have a president right now who doesn't like cannabis at all, despite that he's a Democrat. And, this is why cannabis is also interesting to me. I'm more of a libertarian personally in my political philosophy. I don't identify with either side. I think there's bad things about them both. And I noticed I didn't say good things about them both. There's bad things about them both. In my perspective, I just think that the Democrats are terrible leaders on this issue, and they've been terrible leaders on this issue for years. And now they're finally beginning to recognize that they can cure some prior social ills that were around the cannabis plant and create a regulatory framework that generates jobs and dollars. But the Republicans, Cory Gardner, one of our former senator from Colorado, he put out a great bill, which is a Republican-led measure years ago. It didn't go anywhere, but I think it was representative of the Republican philosophy about cannabis. It's about personal freedom. It's about states' rights. It's about jobs and criminal justice reform. Let's not waste money on something that's not causing terrible effects on society. So, who takes it and runs with it? That's the biggest question. And it's a no-brainer.
I totally agree. If you had the power right now to release everybody in prison for a cannabis offense that's sitting in a jail cell for some bullshit cannabis offense, would you?
I believe I would, but there's always more to the story, because cannabis offenses on their own should not be criminally prosecuted. Personal use, personal consumption, personal possession. And people have gone to jail for that for a very long time, particularly when you factor in some of these 3 strikes and you're out type scenarios. It has decimated societies, particularly low income societies and minorities communities because of that. And by the way, if you get arrested for something like that, you also can't get student loans. So it's sort of, it cascades, right? But at the same time, and, part of me having a little bit of a background with federal law enforcement and some people in my family, I look at the idea that if you wanted to go after people that were making heroin, fentanyl, meth, whatever the drug of the day is that's being trafficked, they always were selling marijuana as well. So, so finding somebody with 10 pounds of marijuana wasn't just some simple hippie growing it in his basement, probably 9 times out of 10. It was probably someone who was attached to something else where human beings are being trafficked and there's, violence associated with it. And they're selling other things that ruin people's lives, like cocaine or heroin or whatever the case might be. So there's merit to that as well. So that's why I equivocate a little bit. On the personal consumption and possession side, no, you shouldn't go to jail. But if you have 10 kilos of marijuana and you were involved in other larger drug operations, then there's probably a reason that, you're behind bars to begin with. So that's the way I look at it.
That's a pretty strong perspective. I hadn't never thought of it that way. I appreciate you sharing that with me. Based on what you did say, then I'm guessing you're against the legalization of, quote, all drugs. You would vote against that.
Well, I don't know. I also think we've seen experiments in a place like Portugal where they did legalize all drugs. And the demand for drugs, and this was years ago. So the focus of policing drugs from a law enforcement perspective shifted to a public health perspective. And the numbers of heroin users and addictive substance users went down.
Really?
People were helping them get off drugs.
Really?
So it became less of a scourge on society when they legalized it outright. Now, would that happen in the United States with our personality as Americans? I don't know. But if that truly could occur from a public policy standpoint in America, then I'd be supportive of those experiments. We've seen it happening, something like that happening in Oregon. We'll see how that goes. But, at the end of the day, I've seen one of my very good friends from high school died away. He died when I was in law school. He was, he graduated college. He played football. We were roommates for a couple of years. He always liked speed, like cocaine. And that was never, ever something I was interested in. I'd go out and hang out with the boys, but that was not my thing. And one time he got thought what he thought was cocaine, leaving a bar at 2:30 a.m. A bunch of our friends were there, and it was something else, probably heroin or something. And he did it the same way, and he died. I've seen people that get addicted to it, and they lose everything. And parents, you've seen these, so addiction like that scares me. But should those people be arrested, or should they be given other support? Well, the idea for the latter really worked in a place like Portugal and some other places, and the studies would seem to support it. I just don't know if our little American brains could handle that.
Generally, it's weird. I lean, I feel like I lean conservative on financial stuff and taxes, and I lean liberal on social issues. I'm kind of like you, maybe I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't know what the hell I am, but I do know that, generally, I don't give a shit what my neighbor is doing with drugs, right? Like, if he wants to strap his arm up in his restroom and shoot heroin up his arm, I don't give a shit, as long as it doesn't affect me, generally, right? But when it affects minors, or when you put children at risk, or things like that, that's a problem. So great answer. Appreciate you answering that. Okay, I got a couple more. I know we're almost out of time. Couple more. You are a contributing writer to Forbes magazine, right? Many times. How come you haven't written a book? Where's the book at? Where's the Bob Hoban book?
There's a book, all right. The book, actually, there is a book. I wrote it, and that book goes through about 2012, early 2013. So then we're fleshing out other parts of it. So, at the end of the day, there's the push to get something like that published. Believe it or not, I do have a literary agent. We've shopped that book.
Okay.
We've shopped the outline for picking up from that story.
Okay.
The literary community, and it changes every month, but their perspective has been, we bet on this, but we think it's going to take a couple, 3 years for people to really see this more as the story. And then it becomes, what does the consumer want to read? Do they want to read the story from my perspective, which becomes more about me and what I saw, or do they want to read the story about how cannabis was legalized and have a bunch of characters in it? So it really is, how do you write the book? How do you position the book? So there's a lot of things like that that go on. To date, we've gotten some offers on books. I'm not just going to go self-publish it, and I'm not going to just have the first publishing house that comes along publish these books. And we've gotten offers like that, but it's very, to me, if I want to do it, I would like to do it right. Not just because why do it if it's not going to be done, at a high level is the way I figure. I'd love to see a book like that, not because of me to pat myself on the back, but I'd love to have middle America read this story, because it's a story that you've been a part of, you've lived and breathed it, you've seen it. Yep. And so many of us, it's a story that I think a lot of Americans don't know that really exists, and how we work to not just legalize cannabis, but to professionalize it, to make it an industry that's a good corporate citizen and making people proud that we built something. That's what I think we were a part of.
For sure.
And that's what I think would be cool about it. And unless I can get there where we get that kind of audience, then I don't know. And from the literary agent's perspective, and they're a good one out of New York, they don't see the demand for this type of story yet. So we'll see.
And that's interesting. Here's my personal opinion on it. I definitely would encourage you to put in the cool character stories, right? Like I wouldn't want to pick it up and just read about the business aspect of it and the legal aspect of it, right? I want to hear about, hey, the time that I had to meet Johnny in a dark alley, and Johnny, and that stuff's got to be in there. That's got to be in there, man.
No, I'm with you 100%. And that's one of the things, because the shell of the story can go any direction. It would require character development and some other things, but that's the cue that we've been waiting for. I also, Steve, I haven't been focused on it in years, because when I started writing the book years ago, the idea was, let's write a book, as so many people do, to get your name out there. And then I'm very pleased to say, because of hard work, my name kind of speaks for itself now.
Yeah, your name's already there. Yeah.
You're
not one of those guys that has to launch a book for a business card. You're way past that.
So that's why I say I'm sitting in the catbird seat. So if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right.
Yeah, that's very good. Last question, sir. Last question. If you, at this point in your life, 46 years old, right? Awesome, successful career, great family. You've been the international major leader in cannabis. You could stop right now and retire and kind of say to yourself, hey, I did pretty good, right? Like you could, if you wanted to. So great career. At this stage, if you had to define your go forward core purpose in life from this point forward, what is Bob's core purpose the rest of the way?
This is not the end of the story, but Jerry Garcia once said, in this life, I choose fun. And I choose fun, and everything I do is fun. Every single thing I do is fun. And that's why I'm working hard during the daytime and getting on a motorcycle and driving 60 miles an hour on trails on Saturday. So I choose that. I do. And when work isn't fun anymore, then I won't work as hard. I don't think I'll ever not work, because I'm connected to too many people that rely on me for things, and I can enjoy some semblance of being really busy down to being just a little bit busy. But that's when I'll stop working. But also the real answer is, my son's still in high school. He's a junior. So when he's graduated high school next year, and he's a basketball player, so it's fun to watch and see his development and be around for that. When he's out of high school, then he's an adult. And I wouldn't say my job is done, especially with a boy, because my daughter's the older one. That's another story. she's got it all together. The boy needs a little bit of work, as I did, I'm sure. But once that's pointed in a positive direction, I think that it'll change my mindset on how I want to use every minute of my day. So until then, it's work hard, play hard, and try to do it with as many fun and cool people as you can.
Bob, thank you so much for being on the Riderflex podcast and sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, Steve. Anytime. And you and I need to grab a beer one of these days soon.
Absolutely soon.